Day 4 began with silence. No artillery fire, no probing attacks, just an eerie quiet that hung over the ruined city like a funeral shroud. Commander Harrison knew what it meant. The Keth were preparing something big. He could feel it in his bones. He climbed to the top of a damaged tower and looked out across the plain beyond the city. What he saw made his blood run cold. The entire Keth army was assembled. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers stood in formation. Tanks and armored vehicles stretched to the horizon. Aircraft circled overhead like hungry birds. Drekthar was committing everything to one final assault. Harrison climbed back down and gathered his officers. Their faces were tired and grim. They had fought for 3 days without rest. Ammunition was running low. Over 200 Marines had been killed or wounded. "This is it," Harrison said. "They are throwing everything at us. We fall back to the city center and form a final perimeter around the refugee shelters. We hold as long as we can." No one asked what would happen when they could no longer hold. They all knew the answer. The Marines began their retreat. They moved in organized groups, covering each other as they fell back through the rubble. They destroyed supplies they could not carry, and collapsed buildings to slow the enemy advance. Lieutenant Morgan led the rearguard. She was the last line of defense, the wall between the refugees and death. Her shoulder wound from the previous day throbbed with pain, but she ignored it. There would be time for pain later, or there would be nothing at all. The Keth assault began at noon. They came from every direction at once. The thunder of their advance shook the ground. Their war cries filled the air. The Marines met them with everything they had left. Private Walsh fired until his rifle overheated. Then he picked up a fallen Keth weapon and kept firing. He had been scared on the first day. Now he felt nothing but cold determination. Corporal Hayes, still bandaged from the night raid, fought from a makeshift stretcher. He could not walk, but he could still shoot. 2 Marines carried him from position to position, and he repaid them with deadly accurate fire. Sergeant Cole held the northern approach. His squad was down to just 8 soldiers. They faced hundreds of Keth, but Cole refused to give ground. "They want this street," he growled. "They can pay for it in blood." The battle was savage beyond words. Buildings collapsed as both sides used explosives. Fires raged out of control. The smoke was so thick that visibility dropped to almost nothing. Marines and Keth fought hand-to-hand in the darkness. By afternoon, the perimeter had shrunk to just a few blocks. The Marines held a rough circle around the central plaza where the refugees sheltered underground. Commander Harrison moved among his soldiers, rifle in hand, fighting alongside them. Ammunition ran out. Marines fixed bayonets and charged. Medics grabbed weapons from the dead and joined the line. Even wounded soldiers, who could barely stand, refused to stay down. Lieutenant Morgan rallied the eastern defenders for a counterattack. She led 20 Marines in a desperate charge that pushed the Keth back long enough to evacuate 300 civilians to safer positions. A piece of shrapnel tore through her shoulder, but she kept fighting. When her soldiers tried to pull her back, she refused. "I am not leaving until everyone is safe." The sun began to set. The Marines were exhausted. Nearly half of them were dead or too wounded to fight. The survivors formed a last desperate ring around the plaza. Commander Harrison stood at the center with his remaining officers. "It has been an honor," he said quietly. They prepared for the end. Then the sky changed. At first, Harrison thought it was more Keth aircraft, but these ships were different. They were bigger, faster, and they bore the emblems of the Galactic Concord. The relief fleet had arrived. 15 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel above the planet. 2 Valorian dreadnoughts, massive ships bristling with weapons, led the formation. Behind them came a human battlecruiser, the USS Reliant, along with cruisers and destroyers from a dozen different species. The Keth orbital fleet tried to respond, but it was too late. The Concorde ships opened fire with devastating accuracy. Within minutes, every Keth warship was destroyed or fleeing. Dropships descended through the clouds. Fresh troops from across the galaxy poured into the city. Human reinforcements. Soldiers from species that Harrison had never even heard of. They all came to help. The Keth ground forces found themselves cut off. Their orbital support was gone. Reinforcements would not be coming. The hunters had become the hunted. Drekthar tried to rally his soldiers for a final push, but the arrival of the Concorde fleet had shattered their morale. Keth soldiers began to surrender in groups. Officers threw down their weapons. The assault collapsed. Drekthar himself was captured trying to flee the planet in a stolen shuttle. He was brought before Commander Harrison in chains. The warlord who had conquered dozens of worlds looked broken and defeated. "You were supposed to be weak," Drekthar snarled. "Your species is young and foolish. How did you defeat me?" Harrison looked at the alien with tired eyes. "We did not defeat you. The Galactic Concorde defeated you. We just held the line until they arrived." "But why?" Drekthar demanded. "These creatures are nothing to you. You had no reason to die for them." Harrison did not answer. He simply turned and walked away. Some things could not be explained to those who would never understand. As the smoke cleared over Alindra, the surviving Marines gathered in the central plaza. Of the 600 who had dropped 4 days ago, only 312 were still standing. They were filthy, wounded, exhausted, and victorious. Elder Counselor Thyron approached Commander Harrison. The old Valorian's eyes were filled with tears. He walked slowly, leaning on a cane, but his back was straight with dignity. "We called for help," Thyron said, in a voice that trembled with emotion. "And you came. You did not know us. You owed us nothing. You had every reason to stay away. Why did you come?" Harrison looked at his Marines, at the Valorians emerging from the shelters, at the smoke still rising from the broken city. He thought about the friends he had lost and the battles they had won. "Because you asked," he said simply. Thyron stared at him for a long moment. Then he bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in Valorian culture. "We will never forget," the elder promised. "As long as our species survives, we will remember what humanity did for us." In the years that followed, the story of Velarath Prime spread across the galaxy. The peaceful species of the Concorde, who had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers, began to see them differently. Humans were not remarkable for their technology or their wealth. They were remarkable for something far more rare. When the helpless cried out, humans answered. When the innocent were threatened, humans fought. When all hope was lost, humans emerged through the smoke. The Valorians built a monument in the central plaza of Alindra. It depicted a human marine reaching down to help a fallen Valorian rise. The statue stood 30 meters tall, visible from anywhere in the city. The inscription at its base was simple. They came from the stars. They did not ask for payment. They only asked where to stand. And across the galaxy, other species learned a new truth about the young race called humanity. If you were in danger, if you needed help, if you had nowhere else to turn, you could call out to the humans, and they would come. The second day brought a change in Keth tactics. Commander Drekthar had learned from his mistakes. Direct assault was too costly. The humans were too well dug in. So he chose a different approach. Artillery bombardment began at noon. Shells rained down on the city with terrible force. Buildings that had stood for centuries collapsed into rubble. Fires spread from block to block. The sky turned black with smoke and ash. Commander Harrison ordered all units to move civilians into underground shelters. The Valorians had built tunnels beneath the city long ago for storage and transportation. Now those tunnels became refuges. But not everyone could be moved in time. A shell struck the Eastern Refugee Center. The building shook, and part of the roof collapsed. Screams filled the air as dust and debris fell on the people inside. Lieutenant Morgan rushed toward the damage. She found a section of floor had given way, trapping several Valorians in the basement below. Among them was a child, crying for her mother. Without hesitation, Morgan dropped down into the hole. She pushed aside broken beams and shattered stone. Her hands bled from the sharp edges, but she did not stop. One by one, she lifted the trapped Valorians to safety. The child was last. Morgan cradled the small body in her arms and passed her up to waiting hands above. When she finally climbed out, her armor was dented and her face was covered in dust. But everyone had survived. Sethin watched her with amazement. "You risked your life for our people." Morgan wiped blood from her hands. "That is why we are here." The bombardment continued for hours. By evening, large sections of the city were in ruins. Civilian casualties mounted despite the Marines' best efforts. Commander Harrison knew they could not simply defend. They needed to strike back. He called his officers together in the command post. "The artillery is killing us slowly. We need to destroy it." Sergeant Cole, who had earned the nickname Stone after his defense of the bridge, studied the tactical map. "The main Keth artillery position is here, about 3 kilometers outside the city. Heavy guard. Getting in will be hard. Getting out will be harder." "A night raid," Lieutenant Morgan suggested. "Small team. Move fast and quiet. Plant charges and get out before they know what hit them." Harrison nodded. "I need 50 volunteers. This is strictly optional. The danger is extreme." Every Marine in the room raised their hand. Harrison selected his team carefully. Lieutenant Morgan would lead the assault group. Sergeant Cole would handle security. Private Lisa Trent, the best demolitions expert in the battalion, would plant the charges. They moved out after midnight. The darkness was almost total, broken only by distant fires and occasional flares. The Marines moved like shadows through the ruined streets, slipping past Keth patrols with practiced skill. Sergeant Reeves monitored from orbit. He had found a gap in the Keth sensor network that would give them about 90 minutes before detection was likely. It was not much time, but it would have to be enough. The team reached the edge of the Keth base. Through night vision equipment, they could see rows of artillery pieces lined up on a flat plain. Ammunition crates were stacked nearby. Fuel tankers sat ready to power the vehicles. It was everything they needed to destroy. Morgan gave the signal. The Marines moved in. The first guards died silently, taken down by knives and suppressed weapons. The team split into groups, each with specific targets. Cole's security squad set up a perimeter to warn of approaching enemies. Morgan led the main assault toward the artillery. Private Trent worked quickly. She attached explosive charges to fuel lines and ammunition stores. Her hands were steady despite the danger. She had trained for this 1,000 times. Now it was real, but the training held. A Keth patrol rounded a corner and spotted them. Gunfire erupted, shattering the silence. "Contact!" Cole shouted. "Multiple hostiles, north side." The Marines returned fire. The quiet infiltration became a desperate firefight. Alarms began to wail throughout the Keth base. Soldiers poured out of barracks, grabbing weapons and rushing toward the sounds of battle. "Trent," Morgan called out. "How much longer?" 2 minutes, Trent replied, still working on the last charges. Morgan gritted her teeth. They did not have 2 minutes. Keth's soldiers were closing in from every direction. Everyone fall back to rally point. Cover Trent. The Marines formed a defensive circle around the demolitions expert. They fought off wave after wave of attackers. Bodies piled up around their position. A Keth soldier burst through their line and lunged at Trent. She saw him coming, but her hands were full of explosives. There was nothing she could do. Corporal Derek Hayes threw himself between them. He took the blow meant for Trent and went down hard, but his rifle kept firing, cutting down the attacker. "Charges set," Trent shouted. "Move," Morgan ordered. "Everyone out. Now." The Marines ran. They sprinted through the chaos of the base, shooting their way through anyone who got in the way. Hayes was wounded badly, blood pouring from his side. He could not keep up. Trent grabbed him and pulled his arm over her shoulder. "I am not leaving you." Behind them, Ket's soldiers gave chase. They reached the tree line just as the timers hit 0. The explosion was massive. Fuel and ammunition detonated in a chain reaction that lit up the night sky. The blast wave knocked everyone flat. For a moment, it seemed like the sun had risen early. When the Marines looked back, the entire artillery position was gone. A crater marked where it had stood. Secondary explosions continued as scattered munitions cooked off. They had done it. But the cost was high. 18 Marines did not make it back. They had fallen during the raid, giving their lives so others might survive. Harrison met the returning team at the edge of the city. He saw the exhaustion and grief on their faces. He saw the wounded being carried by their comrades. He saw the empty spaces where good soldiers should have been. "You did well," he said quietly. "They will be remembered." Day 3 brought something unexpected. The Valorians, inspired by the Marines' sacrifice, began to help. They were not fighters, but they found other ways to contribute. Elder Counselor Fyron himself worked alongside the medics, tending to wounded Marines. His old hands were gentle and skilled. "You fight for us," he said. "Let us care for you." Valorian scouts began guiding Marine patrols through the city. They knew every street and alley, every hidden passage and shortcut. Their knowledge saved lives. Sethin approached Lieutenant Morgan with an idea. "We have an old emergency broadcast system. It has not been used in generations. But if we can boost its signal, we might reach other Concord ships. We might speed up the arrival of reinforcements." Morgan called for technical specialist Dunlap. He had been dropped to the surface after the initial landing to help with communications. Together with Sethin, he worked through the night on the ancient equipment. By dawn, they had it working. The signal went out across the stars. "This is Velorath Prime. Human Marines are defending our city. We are holding. Please hurry." Somewhere in the void of space, other ships heard the message. They changed course and accelerated. Help was coming, but it was still days away, and the Keth were massing for a final assault. The longest night was over, but the hardest battle was yet to come. The drop pods hit the ground with thunderous crashes. Metal shells split open, and Marines poured out into the burning streets of Aelindra. Smoke hung thick in the air, making it hard to see more than a few meters ahead. Lieutenant Katie Morgan landed in the Eastern District near the main refugee center. Her pod had come down hard, and her shoulder ached from the impact. But there was no time to worry about pain. She grabbed her rifle and climbed out into the chaos. Around her, other pods were opening. Marines formed up quickly, years of training kicking in without thought. They moved to cover positions and scanned for enemies. A Valorian emerged from a nearby building. He was young, with pale blue skin and wide, frightened eyes. He wore simple clothing and carried no weapon. He stared at the armored humans with complete shock. "Who are you?" he asked in a trembling voice. "I am Lieutenant Morgan, United Earth Marine Corps. We received your distress signal. We are here to help." The Valorian's eyes filled with tears. "You came? Someone actually came." "What is your name?" Morgan asked. "Sethin. I have been trying to organize the evacuation. There are thousands of people in the refugee center, children and elderly. We have no weapons. We have no way to defend ourselves." Morgan put her hand on his shoulder. "You have soldiers now. Show me where the refugees are." Sethin led her through the smoky streets toward a large building that had once been a community hall. Inside, hundreds of Valorians huddled together in fear. Children cried, and parents tried to comfort them. The elderly sat with blank expressions, too tired and scared to react. Morgan called out orders to her squad. Set up defensive positions at every entrance. I want eyes on every approach. No one gets in without permission. They overturned furniture to create barricades and set up firing positions at windows. Within minutes, the building was transformed from a shelter into a fortress. Across the city, Commander Harrison had landed in the central plaza. Smoke from burning buildings created a haze so thick he could barely see the sky. He immediately set up a command post in the ruins of an old library. The walls were thick stone that would provide good protection. Corporal Amy Chen worked quickly to set up communication equipment. She established contact with the other squads scattered across the city, and with Sergeant Reeves aboard the Endeavor. All units report in, Harrison ordered. One by one, the squads checked in. Most had landed safely, but 3 pods had been hit by anti-aircraft fire during descent. 9 Marines were dead before they even reached the ground. Harrison closed his eyes for a moment. 9 lives lost already. He had a city to defend. All units, establish defensive perimeters around civilian positions. Priority is protecting the refugees. Do not engage enemy forces unless absolutely necessary. We need to conserve ammunition. Private Walsh was stationed at a window overlooking a main street. His hands shook slightly as he gripped his rifle. He had trained for combat many times, but this was real. Real enemies were coming. Real bullets would be flying. Corporal Hayes noticed his nervousness and moved closer. Steady, Walsh. Remember your training. Breathe slow. Watch your sector. You will be fine. Walsh nodded and tried to calm his racing heart. He focused on the street below, watching for any sign of movement. The first Keth assault came within 2 hours. A mechanized column rolled toward the eastern district where Lieutenant Morgan was stationed. Keth tanks rumbled down the wide avenue, followed by hundreds of soldiers on foot. They moved with confidence, expecting no resistance. Morgan watched them approach through her scope. She waited until they were well within the kill zone. Then she gave the order. Open fire! The Marines unleashed everything they had. Rockets streaked toward the lead tanks, and explosions ripped through the column. Rifle fire poured down from windows and rooftops. The Keth soldiers scattered in confusion, trying to find cover. The first tank exploded in a ball of flame. The second tried to retreat, but was hit by another rocket. Keth soldiers fell by the dozens, as Marine marksmen picked them off with precise shots. The attack fell apart within minutes. The surviving Keth retreated, leaving behind burning vehicles and dead comrades. Morgan allowed herself a small smile. The first battle was won. But she knew it was only the beginning. News of the ambush reached Keth Commander Drekthar in his forward base outside the city. He was a massive creature with gray armored skin and 4 arms. He had conquered dozens of worlds and had never faced real opposition. He was furious. How many humans are there? He demanded. Our scouts estimate 500 to 600, his aide replied. Drekthar laughed bitterly. 600 against my 15,000, and they dare to resist. I will crush them like insects. He ordered a full assault from all 3 directions. Every soldier, every tank, every weapon would attack at once. The humans would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The assault began at nightfall. Keth forces poured into the city from the north, east, and south. The streets filled with the sound of gunfire and explosions. Buildings shook and windows shattered. The Marines fought like demons. They used every trick they knew. They set traps and ambushes. They moved through buildings and attacked from unexpected angles. Every street became a battleground. Sergeant Marcus Cole led a squad defending a bridge over a small river. It was the only crossing point in the northern sector. If the Keth captured it, they could flank the main defensive line. The Keth attacked the bridge again and again. Wave after wave of soldiers charged across, only to be cut down by marine fire. Cole stood at the center of the line, his rifle never stopping. "Hold the line," he shouted. "They do not get across." For 4 hours his squad held that bridge. They ran low on ammunition and had to take weapons from fallen enemies. 3 Marines died defending that position. But when dawn came, the bridge was still in human hands. The other squads around the city told similar stories. Everywhere the Keth attacked, they found fierce resistance. The Marines gave ground slowly, trading space for time. Every meter cost the enemy dearly. By morning, the Keth had suffered over 2,000 casualties. The Marines had lost 47. The line held. Commander Harrison surveyed the damage from his command post. The city was scarred and burning. Many buildings had collapsed, but the refugee centers were safe. The civilians had survived the night. He knew the Keth would attack again. They had more soldiers and more weapons. Eventually, the Marines would run out of ammunition. Eventually, the line would break. But not today. Today, human Marines had shown what they were capable of. Today, they had looked impossible odds in the face and refused to back down. Somewhere in the Eastern District, Sethan watched Lieutenant Morgan tend to a wounded Marine. He had never seen anything like these humans. They were not bigger or stronger than the Keth. They had worse equipment and fewer numbers. But they had something the Keth did not. They had courage. They had determination. They had the will to fight for people they had never met. Sethan began to understand why his people had been saved. It was not luck or chance. It was because somewhere in the galaxy there was a species that answered when others called for help. The smoke continued to rise over Alindra. But through that smoke, human Marines stood ready. They would not retreat. They would not surrender. They would hold the line. The Endeavor dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velarat system. Commander Harrison stood on the bridge and looked at the main screen. What he saw made his stomach turn. The planet below was burning. Great scars of black and orange covered the surface where orbital bombardment had struck. Smoke clouds rose so high they could be seen from space. Keth warships moved in lazy circles around the world, confident that no one would challenge them. "Get me a full scan," Harrison ordered. "I want to know exactly what we are facing." Technical specialist Chris Dunlap worked at his station with quick fingers. He was young, barely 25, but he was the best at reading sensor data on the entire ship. After a few minutes, he looked up with a pale face. "It is bad, sir," he said. "The Keth have over 15,000 ground troops on the surface. They have tanks, artillery, and air support fighters. Their fleet has 6 warships in orbit." Lieutenant Morgan stepped closer to the screen. "And how many Marines do we have?" "Just under 600, Dunlap replied. The bridge went quiet. Everyone understood the math. They were outnumbered more than 20 to 1. A direct fight would be suicide. Sergeant Reeves spoke up from his position near the tactical display. "What about the civilians? Where are the Valorians?" Dunlap adjusted the sensors. "Most of them have gathered in the capital city, a place called Alindra. There are approximately 200,000 of them there, mostly elderly, children, and caretakers." "And the Keth?" Harrison asked. "Closing in from 3 directions. Based on their speed, they will reach the city in about 36 hours. Harrison gripped the railing in front of him. He knew what the Keth did to conquered populations. They showed no mercy. Everyone in that city would be killed or taken as slaves. 200,000 innocent lives would be destroyed. "We cannot beat them in a straight fight," Reeves said slowly. "But maybe we do not have to beat them. Maybe we just have to slow them down." Morgan turned to face him. "What do you mean?" "I mean we hold the city. We dig in and make them fight for every street and every building. We buy time until Concord reinforcements arrive." Harrison considered this. How long until backup can reach us? Dunlap checked his calculations. If the Concorde responds immediately, 4 to 6 days, but they might not respond immediately. It could be longer. So we hold for a week, Harrison said. 600 Marines against 15,000 Keth soldiers, in a city full of civilians we need to protect. It sounds impossible, Morgan admitted, but what other choice do we have? Leave them to die? Harrison shook his head. He had not come all this way to turn back now. Those people had called for help, and he was going to give it to them. Here is the plan, he said. The Endeavor will stay mobile and draw the attention of the Keth fleet. We will play cat and mouse in the asteroid fields. Keep them busy and confused. Meanwhile, the entire Marine battalion drops to the surface. Drop pods? Morgan asked. Drop pods. We land directly in the city and establish a defensive perimeter. We use the urban terrain to our advantage. Make them come to us. Reeves nodded slowly. Urban combat is messy. It takes away their numbers advantage. They cannot use their tanks and artillery effectively in tight streets. Exactly, Harrison said. We turn their strength into a weakness. Every building becomes a fortress. Every street becomes a kill zone. He looked around the bridge at his officers. They were scared, but they were also determined. They had trained for years, and now they would finally put that training to use. Lieutenant Morgan, you will lead the ground assault. Sergeant Reeves, you stay aboard the Endeavor and coordinate supply drops. We will need ammunition, medical supplies, and reinforcement if anyone can be spared. Morgan straightened her spine. Understood, sir. One more thing, Harrison said. I am going down with the Marines. The bridge erupted in protests. Reeves stepped forward with concern on his face. Commander, your place is on the ship. You need to coordinate the overall operation. Harrison shook his head. My place is with my Marines. Reeves, you are more than capable of running things from up here. I need to be on the ground. Those people need to see that we are willing to fight beside them. Reeves wanted to argue more, but he saw the look in Harrison's eyes. There was no point in trying to change it. Yes, sir, Reeves said finally. Give 'em hell. The Marines gathered in the hangar bay to prepare for deployment. Drop pods were loaded with weapons and equipment. Soldiers checked their armor and said goodbye to friends who would stay on the ship. Private First Class Kevin Walsh was only 22 years old. He had joined the Marines to pay for college, but had found something unexpected. He had found a family. The soldiers around him had become his brothers and sisters. Now they were about to face the greatest challenge of their lives. You scared? Asked Corporal Derek Hayes, who stood nearby. Terrified, Walsh admitted, but I am going anyway. Hayes clapped him on the shoulder. That is what courage is, being scared and doing it anyway. Commander Harrison walked among his troops, stopping to speak with each squad. He shook hands and looked them in the eyes. He wanted them to know that he believed in them. Listen up, he called out when everyone was assembled. I am not going to lie to you. This mission is dangerous. Some of us will not come back. But there are 200,000 innocent people down there who will die if we do not help them. He paused and let his words sink in. The Valorians called out for help. They did not know who would answer. They did not know if anyone would come. But we heard them, and we are going to show them what human Marines are made of. A cheer went up from the assembled soldiers. Fists punched the air, and boots stamped the deck. Mount up, Harrison ordered. We drop in 10 minutes. The Marines climbed into their drop pods. The metal shells closed around them with heavy clanks. Inside, it was dark and cramped. Each soldier was alone with their thoughts and their fears. Lieutenant Morgan sat in her pod and thought about her parents back on Earth. She had not spoken to them in months. She wished she had called them before this mission, but it was too late now. All she could do was survive and call them after. The countdown began. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 3, 2, 1. The drop pods launched from the Endeavor, like bullets fired from a gun. They screamed through the atmosphere of Velarath Prime, burning trails of fire across the sky. Below them, the city of Elindra waited. The Valorians looked up and saw the streaks of light falling toward them. They did not know what was coming. They did not know that help had finally arrived. The Keth saw the drop pods too. Their commanders shouted orders and prepared for battle. They had expected no resistance. They had expected easy prey. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The pods crashed into the city streets and burst open. Human Marines emerged from the smoke and fire with weapons ready. Commander Harrison was first out of his pod, his rifle already searching for targets. The battle for Velarath Prime had begun. The year was 2347, and humanity had spread across dozens of star systems. They had joined the Galactic Concord 80 years ago, becoming part of a peaceful alliance of over 40 different species. Most aliens viewed humans as newcomers, curious but unremarkable. The violent history of Earth was seen as a footnote, something primitive that humans had outgrown. Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the carrier ship Endeavor and watched the stars pass by. He was a tall man with gray eyes and short brown hair. He had served in the United Earth Marine Corps for 20 years, but had never seen real combat. His unit, the 47th Rapid Response Battalion, mostly did escort work and helped with disasters on colony worlds. Lieutenant Katie Morgan walked up beside him and smiled. She was his second in command, a woman with red hair and a sharp mind. She often joked that they were the most well-armed humanitarian workers in the entire galaxy. "Another quiet patrol," she said. Harrison nodded, but did not answer. Something felt different today, though he could not explain why. Far across the galaxy, on a beautiful world called Velarath Prime, terrible things were happening. The Valorians were a peaceful species who loved art and knowledge. They had never built weapons or trained soldiers. They had no enemies and saw no need for such things. But the Keth Dominion did not care about peace. The Keth were conquerors who refused all contact with the Galactic Concord. They took what they wanted and destroyed anyone who resisted. Their warships appeared in the Velarath system without warning and began their attack. The Valorian defense fleet was small and outdated. It was destroyed in just a few hours. Keth soldiers landed on the planet's surface and began their march toward the cities. Fire and smoke rose into the sky as the invasion spread. Elder Counselor Thyron watched from the capital city of Elindra. He was old, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that had seen many centuries. His people ran through the streets in terror, not knowing where to go or what to do. They had no weapons. They had no soldiers. They had nothing but fear. Thyron said to the council, "We must call for help." And another counselor replied, "No one will come in time. We are too far from the core worlds. By the time anyone receives our message, we will all be dead." Thyron looked out the window at the smoke rising in the distance. The Keth were getting closer. He thought about the children hiding in shelters below the city. He thought about the artists and teachers and healers who would be killed or enslaved. He could not simply give up. "I will send the signal anyway," he said. "Perhaps someone will care." He walked to the old communication center and activated the emergency beacon. It was a simple message that went out on the Galactic Concord frequency. It said that Velarath Prime was under attack and begged for any nearby ships to help. The signal traveled through space at faster than light speed. It passed dead moons and empty asteroid fields. It bounced between relay stations that had been placed centuries ago. And finally, it reached the Endeavor. Corporal Amy Chen was monitoring communications when the message came through. Her eyes went wide as she listened to it. She immediately sent it to Commander Harrison on the bridge. Harrison read the words on his screen and felt his heart beat faster. Velarath Prime was 3 days away at maximum speed. The Galactic Concord Protocol said he should wait for authorization from Fleet Command before responding. By then, every Valorian on the planet would be dead. He called his senior officers to the bridge. Lieutenant Morgan arrived first, followed by Sergeant First Class Danny Reeves. Reeves was a big man, with dark skin and a calm voice. He had been a Marine for 30 years and knew more about tactics than anyone Harrison had ever met. "You have all seen the message," Harrison said. "I need to know what you think." Morgan did not hesitate. "We should go. Those people need help." Reeves rubbed his chin and thought for a moment. "The Cath are dangerous. They have more soldiers and better equipment than we do. If we go there, we might not come back." "And if we do not go?" Harrison asked. Reeves met his eyes. "Then a lot of innocent people die while we follow the rules." Harrison turned to look out the window at the stars. He thought about why he had joined the Marines in the first place. It was not for glory or adventure. It was because he wanted to protect people who could not protect themselves. What was the point of having all this training and all these weapons if he was not willing to use them when it mattered? "Set a course for Velarath Prime," he ordered. "Maximum speed." The navigation officer looked surprised. "Sir, we do not have authorization from Fleet Command." "I know," Harrison said. "I will take responsibility. Those people call for help, and we are going to answer." The Endeavour changed course and jumped to faster-than-light travel. The stars stretched into long lines of light as the ship accelerated. In 3 days, they would reach Velarath Prime. Harrison did not know what they would find there, but he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to let innocent people die while he did nothing. On Velarath Prime, Elder Counselor Thyron sat alone in the dark communication center. He did not know if anyone had heard his message. He did not know if help was coming. All he could do was wait and hope. Outside, the Keth forces moved closer to the city. Their tanks rolled across the fields, and their soldiers marched in perfect formation. They expected no resistance. They expected an easy victory. They did not know that human Marines were on their way. They did not know that everything was about to change. Thyron closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to the old gods of his people. He asked them to send someone, anyone, who could save his world. He did not care where they came from or what they looked like. He just needed them to be brave enough to fight. 3 days away, Commander Jake Harrison was already preparing his battalion for war. He gathered his Marines in the hangar bay and told them the truth about what they were facing. He did not make promises he could not keep. He did not pretend the mission would be easy. "There are innocent people who will die without our help," he said. "This is what we trained for. This is why we became Marines. Are you with me?" The response was immediate and loud. Every Marine in the hangar raised their fist and shouted. They were scared, but they were also ready. They had spent years waiting for a chance to make a difference. Now that chance had finally come. The Endeavour raced through the darkness of space toward a world on fire. 600 Marines checked their weapons and prepared their equipment. They wrote letters to their families and said prayers to whatever gods they believed in. War was coming, and they would meet it head-on.